In this session, we will discuss about the system models. Now, processes run on processors. In a traditional system, there is only one processor. So the question of how the processor should be used does not pop up. Whereas in distributed system, we have n number of processors. So we require to know how the processors are to be used. So in this session, we will discuss how the processor in a distributed system can be organized in different ways. So we have three different models in which the processor can be organized. The first one is the workstation model. Second one is the processor pool model. And the third one, the hybrid model. Now in this session, we will be only discussing about the workstation model. The processor pool model and the hybrid model will be discussed in part 2. Starting with the workstation model. Now this workstation model consists of workstations which are scattered throughout a building or maybe a campus, and are usually connected using a high-speed LAN. Now some of the workstations may be in offices and may be dedicated to a single user, whereas others may be in public areas and may have several different users during the entire day. Now in both the cases, at any instant of time, a workstation either has a single user logged onto a machine, which we call as the owner, or it might be idle. Now some workstations have local disks. And these are called as disk full workstation. Else it will be called as a diskless workstation. So if a workstation is diskless, the file system must be implemented by one or more remote file servers. So the request to read and write files are sent to this file server, which performs the work and sends back the reply. So having a large number of workstations which are equipped with small, slow disks is typically much more expensive than having one or two file servers, which are equipped with huge, fast disks and accessed over the LAN. The diskless workstations are popular since they are easy to maintain. So also when a new release of some program, let's assume it is a compiler, is released, then the system administrator can easily install it on a small number of file servers rather than installing it on dozens or hundreds of machines all over a building or maybe a campus. Another point against the disk is that they have fans, and these fans make a lot of noise. Now, when a workstation have a private disk, this disk can be used in one of the four different ways. The first one being paging and temporary files, paging, temporary files and system binaries, paging, temporary files, system binaries and file caching, and finally a complete local file system. We will discuss each one of this in brief. So we have these four ways in which the workstations can be used. So the first way, So now in this model, the local disks are used only for paging and for the files that are temporary, which are unshared, which can be discarded at the end of the login sessions. And the second way is a variant of our previous method. Over here, the local disk will also hold the executable programs. Now this executable program, for examples, can be compilers or text editors. Now when one of this program is invoked, it is fetched from the local disk rather than fetching it from the file server. So since it is fetching the required programs from a local disk, it reduces the network load. Now such type of programs are rarely changed, and so they can be installed on a local disk and can be kept for a longer period of time. So when there is a new release of this program, it can be broadcasted to all the machines population. Now in the third way, in this mode of operation, users can download files from the file servers to their own disk for reading and writing purposes. So once they download it, make changes to the file and then upload at the end of the login session. So basically the goal of this architecture is to keep long-term storage centralized, thereby reducing the network load, since the files are kept local when they are being used. And finally, the complete local file system. Now over here, each machine can have its own self-contained file system. So this organization provides a uniform and guaranteed response time for the user, and obviously there is little load on the network. But the disadvantage in this sharing is more difficult. So the resulting system is much more closer to a network operating system rather than a true distributed operating system. So the workstations having a private disk can be used in this 4 ways. Now let's have a look at the advantages of this 4 methods. First one, we'll look at the diskless systems. So we'll number it as 0. So the diskless system, the advantages of this are cost is low and maintenance is easy with respect to hardware and software, and also the systems are flexible. Now the workstation with private disk, we have seen 4 methods: 1, 2, 3 and 4. Now the first method reduces the network load over a diskless case, whereas the second method reduces the network load even more as compared to the first one. The third method still lowers the network load and reduces the load on the server as well, whereas in the fourth way, there's any network load and it eliminates the need of file servers. Now looking at the disadvantages, again we start with the diskless. So in the diskless system, there's a heavy network usage. So there are chances that the file servers itself become a bottleneck. With respect to the first method, wherein the workstation is having a private disk, so here cost is higher due to larger number of disks which are required. With respect to the second method, the cost is even more and the complexity is additional in terms of updating the binaries. With respect to the third method, the cost is even much more higher as compared to the first and the second, and is having case consistency problem. Whereas in the fourth method, there is loss of transparency. Now, what do you mean by an idle workstation? At first glance, it might appear that a workstation with no one logged in at the console is considered to be an idle workstation. Even with no one logged in, there may be dozens of programs which are running on the systems. On the other hand, a user who logs in when arriving at his desk in the morning but otherwise does not touch the computer for hours together. So in such a case, it hardly puts any additional load on it. So if no one has touched the keyboard or a mouse for several minutes and no user-initiated processes are running, then that particular workstation can be called as an idle workstation. Now, how do we use these idle workstations? The earliest attempt to use idle workstation was done by using the RSH program that usually comes with the Unix machine. The program on the remote machines were called using this statement, that is RHS, machine, and the command. Now this value over here gives the name of the machine, and the command over here will tell what job is to be done on the remote machine. So basically what the RSH does is, what this program does is, it runs the specified command onto the specified machine. Now there are certain flaws in this RHS. Now the first flaw is the user must tell which machine to use. So this puts a lot of burden on keeping track of the idle machine on the user itself. The second flaw is the program executes in an environment of the remote machine which is usually different from the local environment. And the third flaw is if someone should log into an idle machine on which a remote process is as of now executing or running, then the process will continue to run, and the new user which has logged into the system has to work with a lower performance or maybe find some other machine. So these were the flaws with the RSH program. Now the key issues in identifying the idle workstation. So we'll be discussing basically 3 questions over here. So we require to know how to identify an idle workstation. How can a remote process be run transparently, and what happens if a machine owner comes back on which some remote process is being executed. So we'll first discuss how is an idle workstation found. So basically there are 2 algorithms which we'll discuss over here. The first is the server driven and the second one is the client driven. With respect to the server driven, when a workstation goes idle, so when a workstation is idle, it becomes a potential system which can be called as a idle workstation. So now when it goes idle, it will announce its availability. So it can do this by entering its name, network address, and other properties in something called as a registry file. So we'll assume this registry file as a database. So now when there are other users which want to execute certain commands on this idle workstation, this users will type something like a remote command, and this remote command looks into a registry to find a suitable idle workstation for the required job. Now another alternative way for a server driven is, what it can do is, a newly idle workstation will announce the fact that it has become unemployed and puts this unemployed message as a broadcast message onto the network. So the other workstation will record this information. Now the advantage of doing this is there will be a less overhead in finding all the idle workstation, and there is greater redundancy in this. The disadvantage over here in this case is that it will require all the machines to do the work of maintaining the registry. So what could be the potential danger? Now when there is one registry or many, the potential danger of race conditions will occur. So what does this mean? So if there are two users who invoke the same remote command simultaneously, and both of them discover that the same machine is idle, so what can happen is that they may both try to start up a process at the same time on this idle machine. So to avoid this situation, the remote program can check with the idle workstation which is still free, and then remove itself from the registry and gives a go ahead sign. So what it means is, once a remote machine finds that a particular system is idle, it will remove itself from the registry. So after this, the caller can send over its environment and start the remote process. We will summarize this entire server model using this diagram. So basically this is a registry based algorithm for finding and using idle workstation. So we have an idle workstation, we have a home machine or a process which wants to execute certain process on an idle workstation, and we have the registry. Now in this registry there is a registrar which maintains the list of all the workstation or the idle workstation. So now the first step is an idle workstation registers itself onto the registrar. So whichever idle workstations are there, all the information will be maintained onto the registry. Now there are some other processors, other users which want to execute its job onto the idle workstation. So what this remote machines will do is, it will request the registrar to find out which are the idle workstation, and obviously it will get a reply from the registry. So once it has got a reply from the registry, it will claim that particular machine. After claiming the machine, this idle workstation has to deregister from the register or from the registry so as to avoid the race condition. So now after it is deregistered, no other remote machines can get an access to this idle workstation. Next step, it will set up its environment onto this idle workstation, start the process onto the idle workstation. Step number 7 is it will run the process. Step number 8 is it will exit from the process, or the process exits, and then it will notify the remote machine of whatever is the solution. So this is how a registry based algorithm is used for finding an idle workstation. Next, we will move to the client driven approach. So when a remote is invoked, it will broadcast its request, saying what programs it wants to run, how much memory is needed, whether or not floating point is required or not, and many more parameters. These details are not needed if all the workstations are identical. That means if all the workstations are the same, then this will not be in need. But if the systems are heterogeneous and not every program can run on every workstation, then these parameters are essential. So when the reply comes back, the remote system will pick up one and set it up. So one twist over here is we can have the idle workstation delay their responses slightly. Now this delay will be proportional to the current load on those machines. So if the reply from the least heavily loaded machine will come back first, and then it can be selected. So a machine which is less loaded will reply first, and those machines can be selected to carry out its task. Our next question was, how can a remote process be run transparently? To start with this, it needs the same view of the file system, the same working directory, and the same environment variables. So after this has been set up, the program can begin running. So the actual trouble begins when the first system calls, let's assume it to be a read, is executed. Now in this case, what a kernel must do? So now the answer depends on the system architecture. So if the system is diskless with all the files located on the file server, the kernel can just send the request to the appropriate file server. Exactly the same way the home machine would have done if the processes was running there. Whereas in the other case, if the system has local disks, each with a complete file system, then the request has to be forwarded back to the home machine for further execution. Now there are certain system calls which must be forwarded back to the home machine no matter what, even if all the machines are diskless. For example, reads from the keyboards and write to the screen can never be carried out onto a remote machine. The other problem is system calls involving time can be a problem because different machines have different clocks and they might not be synchronized. We have seen in our previous sessions how the machine can be synchronized using some synchronization algorithms. And finally, we move to our last question, is what happens if the machine owner comes back? So what can be done is, possibly is to kill the intruding process. So this is one of the simplest way is to do it abruptly and without giving any warning. So if you do this, the biggest disadvantage of this is that all the work will be lost and obviously the file system will be left in a chaotic state. So what is the other solution to this is, you give the process a fair warning by sending a signal to allow it to detect the processes that are running and shut down gracefully. If it has not executed within a few seconds or the time limit that is given, then it can be terminated.